At first, everyone at Harbor Point Marina assumed the bobcat was after the gulls. That was the only explanation that fit the hour and the place. The marina woke in layers. Before the bait shop opened, before the first weekend, fishermen started arguing over weather apps and engine noise. Before the coffee kiosk put out the handwritten sign about breakfast burritos, there was only the working sound of water and machinery. Masts tapped lightly in their slips. Halyards clinked against aluminum in uneven rhythms. The tide pushed soft against pilings blackened by years of salt and fuel and sun. Diesel hung low in the air from the charter boats tied along the service dock, mixing with brine, old rope, wet wood, and the metallic tang of morning cold. The fuel pier sat off to one side of the marina, a narrow floating dock with two pumps under a corrugated canopy, and a red cabinet full of spill-absorbent pads, gloves, and emergency shutoff tools. Everyone who worked there knew it was the place you stayed sharp. Fuel docks were never casual. A mistake there did not stay small for long. At 5:41 a.m., Owen Keller was halfway through unlocking the service shed when he saw the bobcat. It stood on the main fuel dock near Pump 2, just beyond the yellow safety bollard, body still and low in the pale blue light before sunrise. For a second, he actually thought someone had brought an exotic pet down from one of the condos on the bluff and let it loose by accident. Then the animal turned its head, and the sharp ears, short tail, and winter-thick spotted coat resolved into something unmistakably wild. Owen stopped with the key halfway in the padlock. "No," he said softly to the empty dock. "What are you doing here?" The bobcat looked at him exactly once. Then it looked down at the water beside the pump float. That was the first thing that felt wrong. A wild cat at a marina was unusual, but not impossible. The hills behind Harbor Point were full of scrub, rabbits, and enough undeveloped gullies for coyotes, foxes, and the occasional bobcat to drift down toward civilization when food or curiosity pulled them. Owen had seen tracks in the parking lot mud after storms, and once found a raccoon inside a bait freezer cage. Wildlife passed through edges like this more than people like to admit, but wildlife did not usually stand on a fuel dock in the open, under electric lights, with nowhere to hide. And it definitely did not stay there when a human started walking toward it. Owen moved slowly down the gangway, boots ringing on the metal grate. The bobcat backed away 3 steps, muscles taut, then stopped at the edge of the float, turned, and stared again at the water by the pilings under Pump 2. Owen felt a low, uncomfortable shift in his chest. He was 37, broad-handed, sun-worn, and had been the marina's maintenance mechanic for almost 9 years. He trusted engines more than people, checklists more than instincts, and experience over excitement. He did not like mysteries. He liked causes, symptoms, solutions. Strange things almost always turned out to be simple once you looked from the right angle. So he looked. At first, he saw only the usual surface clutter of a working marina morning. Drifting weed fronds, reflected dock lights, a coffee cup lodged under a cross brace, the faint undulation of incoming tide around the pilings. Then the light shifted. Something flashed across the water in thin, oily color. Not much, just a tremor of iridescent blue-green magenta sliding under the dock edge and breaking apart in the ripples. Owen went still. A rainbow slick, tiny but real and fresh. He took 2 more steps, crouched carefully near the deck edge, and looked harder. The slick wasn't drifting in from the fairway. It was blooming outward from beneath the pump float itself, feathering over the surface in oily threads. Behind him on the dock, the bobcat let out a short, rough sound. Not a hiss, not quite a growl, something more like a strained bark, and retreated 6 feet down the pier. Owen's whole body changed pace. Fuel spill. Maybe small, maybe not. But if product was seeping into the marina basin from the pump system or line manifold under the dock, every second mattered. Boats sat all around them. Power pedestals hummed nearby. One static spark or engine start at the wrong time, and the morning could become catastrophe. He was already reaching for his radio when the bobcat came back. Not toward him, toward the exact same section of water. It paced once in a tight line near Pump 2 and looked down again. "All right," Owen muttered, pulse now hard in his throat. "I see it." By the time dockhand Riley Chen arrived with 2 cups of bad Marina coffee and no interest in urgency before 6 in the morning, Owen had already shut down the public fuel power switch. Riley noticed that before he noticed the Bobcat. "Why's the pump?" He followed Owen's stare. "Oh." The coffee nearly slipped from his hand. The Bobcat stood 30 feet away on the finger pier, ears forward, watching the float. It looked young now that Riley saw it better. Maybe not fully grown, all long legs and contained wild tension, with one muddy foreleg and fur along the chest that looked damp or clumped. "Is that a bobcat?" Riley asked unnecessarily. "Yes." "Why is it here?" Owen pointed to the water. Riley crouched, saw the slick, and lost all humor at once. "Oh no." He was 23 and smart enough to know that fuel on still morning water near active marina infrastructure was not a small problem. The slick, now that 2 sets of eyes followed it, was unmistakable. Thin, shifting color streaming from under the pump float and slipping along the marina surface in slow, widening tongues. Owen's radio crackled as he called the marina manager, the harbor master, and the spill response contact in one calm, clipped chain. His voice stayed steady because steady voices made bad problems narrower. "Fuel dock emergency. Possible active leak at pump 2. Shutoff engaged. Need absorbent boom and response kit now. Hold all arrivals." Riley, meanwhile, did the one thing he had been trained to do and never expected to actually need before sunrise. He pulled the spill cart from the shed and started staging boom lengths at the gangway. The Bobcat remained. That part unsettled them both more than either said aloud. It should have fled by now, at the first shouted order, the first rolling cart, the first radio burst. Instead, it kept repositioning along the pier and then returning to the section near Pump 2 as if it could not let the place out of sight. When Marina manager Celia Dunn arrived at a near run down the service ramp, she saw 3 things at once: the disabled pump, the stage spill boom, and the wildcat on the dock. Her face made a complicated expression that landed somewhere between disbelief and immediate calculation. "How bad?" she asked. Owen pointed at the slick. The dawn light had strengthened enough now that the rainbow sheen was impossible to miss. It had spread farther along the float line, thin but persistent, blooming from one source point beneath the pump assembly where the submerged feed hose and dispenser line tied into the service junction. Celia swore softly. She was 49, sharp as wire, and had run Harbor Point long enough to know that marinas lived one careless minute away from disaster more often than the public understood. Fuel leaks were rare, but when they happened, the clock started before you knew the size of the problem. "Kill shore power to the fuel pier," she said. "Already isolating," Owen replied. "Good. No boats in or out. Get the booms around the finger slips nearest the pump first." Riley moved instantly. The Bobcat moved too. As the first absorbent boom hit the water, the animal sprang back, then bounded to the main walkway and sat again facing the pump. It looked less like a predator now and more like some exhausted sentinel unable to leave a post. Celia saw it watching the slick, and then Owen. "Why is that cat doing that?" Owen shook his head. "I don't know, but it was here before I saw the fuel." The sentence hung there. The harbor master arrived 3 minutes later, followed by 2 spill contractors from the county yard who, judging from their clothes, had been dragged from bed and were not pleased about it until they saw the surface sheen. Then they became very pleased in the particular professional way people become when a problem is bad, but still young enough to be controlled. Containment happened fast. Boom deployed in a half ring around the fuel dock. Secondary boom at the fairway mouth. Sorbent pads along the float edge. Vapors monitored. Ignition sources locked down. Marina radio traffic restricted. A passing charter captain was turned away from the service lane with enough force in the harbor master's voice that he did not ask questions twice. Through all of it, the Bobcat remained near the fuel pier. One of the contractors finally said what everyone else had been circling around. "That animal's been trying to show you where it is." Celia, who had no patience for mystical nonsense on work time, answered without taking her eyes off the water. "Or it smelled something wrong and wouldn't leave." The contractor shrugged. "Maybe those are the same thing." The leak source revealed itself only when Owen got flat on the dock with a flashlight and looked beneath the pump cabinet float housing between the pilings. There, just above the waterline, a flexible feed line coupling had split along one edge. Not fully blown, worse in some ways, a slow, pressured seep, enough to create the spreading slick, enough to keep feeding product into the Marina basin if left unchecked. Enough, by the smell now rising beneath the dock, to have become something much bigger by the time the first weekend refuels began. "How long?" Celia asked quietly. Owen looked at the volume of surface sheen, the wetness around the line, and the tide pattern. Could have started overnight. Could have been leaking slowly for hours. The thought turned all of them cold in the same place. Had the first boat tied up and fueled normally at 7, no one might have noticed at all until vapors built or product pooled wider beneath the slips. Engines, cigarette ash, shore power arc, any one of 100 ordinary Marina stupidities could have set the morning on fire. Riley swallowed hard. So the cat? No one finished it. Because right then the bobcat did something even stranger. It walked down the finger pier toward the very end, where a small skiff usually tied up for service calls. The line was empty this morning, and near the cleat at the far corner of the float, something bright moved against the gray boards. A tag. A collar tag. Riley saw it first. "What's that?" The bobcat lowered its head to sniff, then stepped back. Owen crossed carefully, keeping one eye on the animal and one on the slick control work behind him. Lying against the dock plank near the cleat was a narrow red nylon collar with a brass tag attached, wet and salt stiff. The tag flipped once in the breeze. Bella and a phone number. Everyone around him went quiet again. For one bizarre second, the whole morning tilted into some even stranger story. "A dog collar," Riley said. Owen picked it up gently by the strap. Freshly broken clasp, damp but not old. He looked at the bobcat. The animal stood there, gaze flicking from the collar to the waterline beneath the pier and back again. Celia understood before he spoke. There was a dog down here. Not on the dock now, not visible anywhere, but enough sign to suggest what might have first drawn the bobcat in the dark hours before dawn. A domestic dog at the water's edge, maybe pulled toward the fuel smell or fallen into the service gap beneath the float. A chase? A rescue attempt? A scramble on the slippery dock that ended with the collar tearing free? No one could say yet, but if some panicked animal had ended up beneath the pump float during the night, it might have thrashed against the line housing hard enough to damage the already weakened coupling. Or, Owen thought grimly, maybe the line had already begun to fail, and the smell alone had pulled both domestic and wild trouble toward the dock. They would likely never know the order, only that the collar was there, the leak was real, and the bobcat had remained. Celia called the number on the tag. A woman answered on the second ring, voice breaking before she even said hello. Her small dog Bella had gone missing the previous night from a nearby live-aboard slip after slipping its leash during a late walk. They had searched the marina until midnight. Nothing. No splash heard, no barking, no body found, just the collar torn off somewhere near the service docks, according to what little they'd pieced together before exhaustion sent them home. Celia asked careful questions while staring at the open water under the float. No, Bella had not been found yet. Yes, they should come down. No, she didn't know what happened. Not completely. A quarter-hour later, Bella turned up alive in the least cinematic but most Marina-realistic place imaginable. Wedged, trembling in a gap between stacked bumper tires under the adjacent service catwalk, coated in fuel-smelling grime and algae, too frightened to bark, having apparently scrambled or swum there after the collar tore free. A spill contractor crawling the containment line spotted the movement and pulled the tiny dog out by hand. The owner arrived just in time to hear Bella scream once in relief and then start shivering in her arms. That might have been the moment the scene fully broke from emergency mode into something more human. Until then, everyone had been working the leak, the booms, the shutoffs, the documentation. But a lost little dog alive on the dock while a wild bobcat stood 30 feet away and watched the whole thing, that was the kind of image people carry long after procedures end. The owner, whose name was Nina Foster, cried openly as Bella licked oil-smelling tears off her chin. Then she saw the bobcat. She actually stopped breathing for a beat. "That cat," Celia nodded once. "It was here when my mechanic arrived." Nina looked from Bella to the fuel sheen to the bobcat and clearly failed to fit the world into any known category. Owen didn't blame her. He was standing inside the same failure himself. Spill crews eventually stemmed the leak fully, clamped the failed coupling, and began recovery operations before the sun was properly above the bluff. The marina remained shut down through the morning. Report forms multiplied. Harbor Patrol took water samples. The county environmental office was notified. Insurance people began their slow vulturing from afar. And through most of it, the bobcat stayed on the edge of the fuel pier. Not close enough to be comfortable, never fully relaxed, always ready to flee. But it did not leave until two things happened. The sheen stopped growing, and Bella, wrapped in a towel in her owner's arms, was carried up the gangway and away from the dock. Only then did the animal's posture change. It stood, looked once at the now boomed water, once at the empty service float, and once more toward the people clustered around the spill cart and the small rescued dog. Then it trotted down the side service ramp, slipped beneath the bait shack stairs, and disappeared into the scrub-choked drainage strip behind the marina fence without a sound. Riley watched the gap where it vanished and said the only thing anybody could think of saying. "Well," he breathed, "I'm never going to explain this right." Neither was anyone else. By lunchtime, Harbor Point Marina was full of versions. The bobcat found the leak. The bobcat saved the marina. The bobcat was guarding the pump. The bobcat led them to Bella. The mechanic only found the spill because the cat wouldn't move. Every version was wrong in details and right in essence. Owen hated the sentimental versions and distrusted the heroic ones. Still, he could not deny the plain chain of events. The animal had been there before the humans. It had fixed itself on the pump before anyone saw the sheen. It had remained until both the leak and the missing dog had been brought out into the open. The county report later said the line likely failed from age and unnoticed stress corrosion accelerated by salt exposure. The dog likely got under the dock while panicked and may or may not have worsened the coupling damage while scrambling free. The bobcat's involvement was not listed anywhere official because governments do not file wildlife intuition as a causal factor. But among the marina staff, nobody forgot it. A week later, after the fuel dock reopened with a brand new line assembly and fresh inspection tags on every fitting, Owen was doing a final walk down before dawn when he stopped near the same section of pier and looked automatically toward the scrub beyond the fence. Nothing there. Just gulls, damp ropes, quiet water, and the ordinary hum of a marina about to wake. Still, he stood for a second longer. Because once, in that half hour before sunrise, when everyone still believes the day will stay ordinary, a bobcat had waited by the fuel pump long enough for a mechanic to look down at the water and notice the rainbow slick that should not have been there. And because of that, fire never found the dock. The spill stayed small, and a little dog came out alive from under the pier instead of becoming one more thing the tide swallowed without witness.